All right, today I'm going to be going over some barbell back exercises. Fucking flush the toilets all day long. Okay, today I'm going to be going over some barbell back exercises. So really to start it off, I figured we would begin with a bent over barbell row. It's essentially the staple, I would say, of barbell back movements. So your traditional bent over barbell row, you're going to be probably just outside a shoulder width grip as far as where exactly you are from that shoulder width to a little, wider. Go with whatever feels comfortable, whatever feels right, kind of whatever you believe is helping you get that maximum back engagement through the movement. So you can play around a little bit to see what feels right for you. But essentially, from there, now you're probably, if you're doing it at a gym or maybe even at home, you might have a rack to lift it out of. I do have a rack behind me, but I'm just doing it off the floor, just in case you don't. So essentially what you'd want to do, if you are coming from the floor, is kind of deadlift it up, and then hip hinge forward, coming just below your knee, and then just rolling straight up and back. The big thing to remember with any rowing movement is that you're actually leading with your elbow. So it's really focusing on driving that elbow back. Whether you're doing dumbbell row, barbell row, whatever it is, the focus is driving the elbow back, not pulling the bar up to your body. With the wrong, focus in pulling the bar up to your body, the tendency is it becomes a bicep dominated movement where you start doing something more like this. And if you notice with that, my elbow isn't really moving a lot. There's a lot of elbow flexion, but the actual range of motion, you don't really see a lot of, upper arm movement. It's a lot more, lower arm movement and a lot of elbow flexion, but I'm not getting that range of motion, through my shoulder, which means I'm not really engaging my back, or at least very minimally engaging my back. Whew. Sorry, just worked out. I'm talking too fast. So that's going to be one of the big things you want to focus on, is just really driving those elbows back, scapular retraction, squeezing everything, backing up. Even if you're not trying to get the lat engagement, you're still, if you're coming out wide, you're still driving those elbows up and back. And there might not be the same scapular retraction there, but it's still pulling through those back muscles as opposed to just pulling pulling with your bicep to pull the bar up to your body. So it's not about the bar moving as much as it's about engaging your back muscles to move the weight. So even a little bit more incomplete range of motion, or maybe you're not coming all the way up to your body, as long as it's the maximum range of motion you can do, engaging your back, that is appropriate. I would recommend you work on a range of motion where you can actually pull all the way there, but whole other thing, and I'm getting off tangent. So that's a traditional barbell bent over row. Now there's two very simple variations to this one. The first one, for me, the first one, because it's what I do more often, is going to be a supinated bent over barbell row. So essentially the same setup, except your palm is going to be facing up, and I usually grip a little bit closer on this one because it is typically going to be a little bit more of a lat dominated movement. So with that, you're here, again, just below the knees, driving those elbows up and back. And then the final variation is going to be a little bit less lat and a little bit more of the rest of your upper back musculature. So more teres, rhomboid, mid-trap, all those things, not as much lat engagement. And that's going to be a wide grip bent over row. So pronated again, but you're going to go a bit wider. I usually recommend anywhere from where you would be gripping for a conventional like bench press to a little bit wider. Some people go as wide as like a snatch grip. I usually don't, but you could, depending on if you're feeling, good muscle recruitment in, those upper back muscles while you're doing it. The wider the better isn't necessarily accurate. You have to make sure, especially for, your lever arms and everybody has a little bit different muscle recruitment through these different ranges of motion because we're not all built identical. So you have to make sure that you're feeling it where you need to be feeling it. But for me, it's usually going to be a similar grip is where I might do, like a wider grip bench press. So that's going to be maybe a finger grip or two wider than I would do a bench press. And then it's going to be a pretty similar thing, except your elbows are kind of staying a little more flared out and driving up and back. So that's going to be it for your standard bent over barbell row. Now, a couple variations to the bent over barbell row would be a Pendle row or a what I would call like a power row, which can be kind of similar to like maybe a Yates row. So we'll cover both of those. So a Pendle row, and the reason I'm covering these two at the same time is when I program for people, a lot of times they don't recognize what the difference is. So it's even experienced lifters sometimes are a little bit less familiar. But essentially a Pendle row, you would want to be extremely, I want to say rigid, but maybe rigid. You want to be in a pretty set body posture throughout the whole rowing range of motion. I like to do them a little bit wider, so maybe more similar to my wide grip row setup. Get everything set, back nice and tight, and then from there, rowing to more toward like my nipple line. So really, the idea of this one is going to be a lot more upper back. Even more so, in my opinion, than just your normal wide grip bent over row. Just because of that body posture, leaning forward more, so you're almost like that flat back is going to take a little bit more of that lat recruitment out of the movement. Now the secondary one is actually going to be a bit more of like an overload technique and more geared toward lats. So we are going to bring our grip in a little bit closer. I usually come pretty much about shoulder width, like almost perfectly shoulder width is where I feel the most comfortable. And then with that, so you could either do it from the floor, which is how I like to do it. So where you're kind of getting set up a little bit higher than a deadlift, but it's similar feeling where you have that tension through your body, and then you're going to get a bit of a hip hinge as you roll up. It's going to be a nice explosive movement. So you notice there's a little more, body English to that range of motion, getting a little hip hinge, and it's very explosive, but also with that closer grip, we are going to be hitting a little bit more lats, and as you're coming up to changing that, hip posture, that's going to change the angle that you're pulling and also help recruit a little bit more lat engagement through the range of motion. It's going to be a one-arm barbell row. So reasons you might do this would be either you don't have dumbbells as heavy as you want to go, or you just want to incorporate a new challenge, because technically speaking, increased muscle activation in the forearm will increase muscle activation through the kinetic chain. And they've had a lot of studies on this with back movements, shoulder movements, chest movements, etc. And it's one of the reasons fat grips are popular, is because that thicker grip increases that muscle activation in your forearm, and that will help you get more muscle activation through that kinetic chain to better work your arms, shoulders, back, etc. So this is a similar concept. And if you wanted, you could even try and do it with a fat grip. It'd be real hard. Probably I'd be doing like the bar maybe. But essentially what you're going to do is get set up, grab the center of the bar, and you might have to play around with it a little bit to find that exact center for you, especially if you're working with a bar like mine where it does not have the center knurling. If it has a center knurling, it's usually pretty easy to figure out. Now, I recommend to do this one without straps, because with straps, you are actually going to end up getting a little bit less forearm activation. Now, you'll still get more forearm activation doing this with straps than you would doing like a dumbbell row with straps, because you still have to balance it. So I guess if you're comparing the two, arguably still a little bit of a benefit here. But if you're really trying to get something out of this, I think doing it without straps, a weight that you can hold on to and really focus on that good muscle contraction, is the best route for it. So for that, I usually just kind of play around with it a little bit until I feel like I find center. I try and do one row, and that was pretty good. Sometimes on that first row, I notice the front or back dips a little bit, so I just have to reposition. But once you find that center position, then it's just almost like doing a dumbbell row. I enjoy doing this, just kind of supporting off my knee. And I think just because there's so much muscle activation through the whole range of motion, I figured why not get the core and hips into it a little bit too.